Since we're going to the observatory, I'm not quite sure how.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
Councilmember Stallman's running a little late. It's his wife's birthday. But we will get started this evening. And first up is an update on our senior service delivery. Then we have a police department presentation. We're going to talk a little bit of trash this evening, and the library annex discussion is part of our agenda. And Kay Wilmesher, you've got the floor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I was here visiting with you all, I think in early January of this year, giving you some ideas of some of the projects that I wanted to work on with aging, the aging area. And I'm back here tonight to tell you a little bit about those projects and some other things as well. And with that, I'll jump right into it. Do you guys do the note handouts? You can pass that around. So I'll explain each of these items, but the first thing is we now have an Aging Well Resource Center at Bemis Library. I'm going to talk a little bit about our new Senior Reach program, the Denver Council of Governments Boomer Bond assessment. We have a new small community group called the Littleton Coalition on Aging Well that I will tell you about, and a small local government partnership I've been working on. So the Aging Well Resource Center, that lives at Bemis, and when you walk in the door, you make an immediate left and go back and see a glass enclosed area which has now been nicknamed the Cube, although it has opaque windows and it's pretty small, but someone stopped by today and told me it's actually called the steam room too. So it looks kind of suspicious. The door is closed most of the time right now, but so that is in the Sophie's Place Place area, which is a good place, I think, to have put it. Sophie Bramley Sylvan was a very active citizen in Littleton and very passionate about visually impaired. And she, together with the city of Littleton, put a resource center in that part of the library for those folks. So we're very excited. So what will we do here? We will take information requests and try to answer questions. We are not experts to start with, but we figure we'll just open the doors and start letting people come in. We can do it by appointment or drop in. We have a database that we have started of our resources. There's so much to add to that all of the time, but we should have that, as well as I think the online searching is probably going to be where we'll get more of our, most of our information. For example, Dr. Cog has a whole, Denver Regional Council of Governments has a whole network of care website that you would log into and get answers to just about everything for aging related. We are going to open on September 2nd. It is a day after the holiday weekend, and it is our soft opening. So that's only because we don't really know what to expect. So we're going to open the doors and just talk to people, and still sort of organizing and putting things together. But we will have, I guess I forgot to mention, brochures and paperwork to hand out too. But anyhow, we'll open up at that time for just to get going, and then in October we'll have a grand opening, which I'll tell you about in a minute. We will be staffed, it will be staffed from 9 to 1, Monday through Friday. I will have a temporary part-time person helping me in there, so it won't just be me. And it's been kind of fun this summer going to the council outreach events, the things that people have said. They're usually just, oh, wow, really? They're just really excited, but these comments from last week were kind of fun. The best thing we could have ever have. Just having these resources for anything like this is a huge help. I don't know where to begin. And that's something that I hear a lot. A lot of people, particularly caregivers, who have a parent who just fell or something happened like that, and now they need to know information about everything, moving, where to take them, medical care, transitioning them. And we won't necessarily be experts in that one area, but I certainly hope that we'll have information to provide. The other things we've gotten a lot of questions about are folks wanting to get connected with each other. I think there's a lot of programs that are already out there that we'd like to enhance, but other things that we can do, more dot connecting, which is what I call it. That'll be more in the second year, but anyhow, I think we have great plans to connect folks. Home care, health care, nutrition, and Alzheimer's are questions that are coming up already. One part of the event that's always kind of fun for me is I go by a plant, and I have win this plant for people to come by, and they put their name and their phone number on the ticket. And then if I pull the ticket and they win, then I call them and I deliver it the next day. So anyway, when you call them and tell them they won a plant, it's like they won $1,000. They're so excited. And then when you show up at their house with the plant, so. The next thing we've been working on is the Senior Reach program. This is a program that was created by Jefferson Center for Mental Health in the mid-2000s. It was first replicated, I should say only replication was in Kansas, one site there. We are the first replication site in the state of Colorado. It is a phone-based community outreach program. So how it operates is we have a call center, and somebody will recognize a senior in distress, needing some type of a resource, call the call center, tell them about the senior. Then the call center will call the senior and talk to them and get the resources to them that they need. So it works opposite of the usual situation where the senior needs to make a phone call and get people to care and come see them. Resources come to the senior instead. Referrals can be made by individuals who see problems, or it can be, for example, like Meals on Wheels does a delivery and they see somebody who's having a really hard time, a really difficult time, so they'll refer them to the call center. When I first heard about this program, I thought, well, it seems unlikely that the older generation would want to be contacted by a call center and talk to them and actually open up to them. But it turns out that the folks that work at the call center are so good at what they do. They're so friendly and caring and spend about 45 minutes with each senior on the phone that there's a 93% engagement rate of the seniors accepting the help that's been offered to them. And then my favorite part of the program, for those of you who know me, is I love evidence-based programs. And this was given the stamp of approval by the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration. And it's got data to prove that it works. And we are collecting data for it as we've started using it. I get kind of excited about the card here at the bottom, only because we're implementing it in Arapahoe and Douglas counties, and it lived in Jeffco and Gilpin and some other counties up north. And this is our own phone number, our own call center phone number. And this is a video of a lady talking about it.
Before I was involved with Senior Reach, I was depressed and had totally lost all confidence. Loss of capacity, I guess, and ability. I just couldn't make up my mind about even the simplest things, like what clothes to wear when all I was going to do was stay in the apartment anyway. I felt very worthless, certainly not happy. And also guilty, I think, because of things I hadn't done. I have had just an amazingly wonderful life, but all that kind of went into the background or whatever, and I just couldn't pull it out again. The therapist from Senior Reach, she gave me the confidence to go ahead and techniques to concentrate on positive things instead of the overwhelming negative thoughts that had been occupying me. It took me back to the person I was 10 years ago. It was like a barrier had been lifted. I would recommend Senior Reach because it helped me so much. This is what made the great change, really.
So one thing that I didn't say already, but about 50% of the calls that come in are for mental health. The rest of them are for resources like food and drawing a blank, clothing, help with their house, things like that.
Footnote on part of this is, having seen a presentation by Senior Reach from Jefferson County, is the backlog that they have with regard having homes be livable on the inside, and the fact that folks tend towards hoarding and the difficulties that that can cause. And that's where they're probably right now on their grant program running at a backlog.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you. The partners for the program are us. We are helping fund the call center. Arapahoe Douglas Mental Health Network is the lead agency. They obviously are providing the therapists for the program. And Seniors Resource Center, which is up north, is providing the call center, mainly because they were the call center for the program in Jeffco. And instead of reinventing the wheel and building our own call center, we thought we would use that call center. They know how to collect data and stick with the fidelity of the program. So we are using them as our call center for now. And then South Metro Health Alliance is another big partner in that they do a lot of PR for the program and are training tons and tons of people already and have big plans to really go and do a lot more of that. Other partners are South Metro Housing Options, TLC Meals on Wheels, the Consortium on Aging Well, Love Inc., and Innovage. And this program is so brand new, we just implemented it on July 1st. And we have less than 5 phone calls, but we're optimistic we will get more. And South Metro Housing Options volunteered to be our trainer. So the bigger organizations that are running this project needed folks to step up and be trainers, and South Metro Housing Options gave us 2 folks to do that. On to the next thing, the Denver Regional Council of Governments Boomer Bond Assessment. So this is a project created by DRCOG and about 70 community partners to find a way to evaluate existing resources and programs and design of communities for older folks, in large part to keep them in their homes and to keep things more affordable in the community. They created a staff assessment. It's got 5 parts, and I talked a little bit about this in January. General information, mobility, housing, community living, which is social places to meet people, parks and trails and things like that, town meetings and so on. Support services is physical and mental and emotional support. And their thought is that with this assessment, they can collect the best ideas that each community has in preparing for the future, and then they put that all together into a best practice directory. So for the city of Littleton, to date, we have 16 staff who have completed the assessment. And to just talk a little bit about the assessment, it is a huge instrument. It is 50 pages, 2 sides. And when I saw it and saw the format of it in paper format, I thought there's no way the staff is going to fill that out. So I broke it up into 5 pieces and I converted it into an electronic format, which helped a lot, but there's still so much there. But in any event, I gave parts to different folks in the organization that I thought would know about those different subject matters. So they have taken those, and so I'm in the process of looking at it and analyzing and making sense of it. And I think what comes of this instrument more than anything is the awareness that staff gets when they're taking it of all the things that are being thought about with regard to preparing for the future and the boom of older folks. But also just the conversation that comes about from having taken it and thinking and talking together about what the city might like to do to prepare. My own interpretations of the assessments is that we're really doing well on some things in Littleton. We have to be very proud about is our transportation, for example. And we're an amazing collaborator. We have so many partners we work really well with and do a really good job. And I think a really good example of that is South Suburban Parks and Recreation, doing trails and parks and things like that with them. But also, there is a really good opportunity for more communication with the older folks in the community and staff. And that's something that I hope that I'll be able to do, to bring them together so we can hear more input. Something else I've been working on is a new community group. It's a small stakeholder group. Folks from health, housing, clergy, education, recreation, and citizens are in this group. And when we initially came together, we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to be efficient, but also know what we wanted to do and get that knocked out. So we didn't spend a lot of time doing a bunch of paperwork and rules and all of that. So we came up with a really nice one-sentence mission statement to promote aging well in the Littleton community. And the first thing that we did was we had a lot of discussions about what were sort of the top things that we would focus on as a community group. And most of the people in the group were really supportive of having or creating a trusted resource center for older folks to come in and get information. Second was for us to find a way to get resources to those folks in need. And this was before I had Senior Reach sort of going in the background. So anyway, this sort of fills that really well. And then health and wellness is another really broad area that the committee's very interested in. So some of the early things that we've done in that group, of course, the city moved very quickly and built the senior center. It's something else. And our first work has been to support the center and figure out what types of things should go in there. Our information, all of the partners in the group, as well as the people that they work with. And I think that'll just be an ongoing process of figuring out what we want to know, what we want to have in there. Talking about the parameters of the center was important to us. So for example, what were we good at? What would we be good at, and what would we not be experts at? So for example, we're not going to be doing taxes, and we're not going to be health insurance specialists, but we will have the information for people to take and make decisions on their own. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we plan to have a grand opening probably in October, and we'll advertise that and tell everybody. And someone told me seniors love balloons, so we'll have balloons and food, and probably organize with our partners and have other activities going on. I'm hoping we can have it at Bemis. Would make sense. Actually, I'm hoping that the other activities can happen at Bemis is what I should say. Another thing that the group felt was important was to participate in those city council outreach events like we have been. And then we're developing a brochure, which just takes time. We'll be doing cards as well fairly soon. This is sort of the behind the scenes thing I've been working on a little bit. I talked about it in January doing, which is bringing together professionals doing very similar work with other communities in the area. I'm a big fan of dot connecting and sharing ideas and resources and not reinventing the wheel. And some of these folks here, for example, Jefferson County and Douglas County, they're hitting it out of the ballpark. They are doing so many incredible things. I am stealing things left and right from them. So it's, we decided that we're going to meet quarterly and talk about different things. We're going to talk about surveys for our next one. Which a lot of people want to know the best way to administer a survey and so on. So our goals and my goals, our goals and my goals are going to be to open the Aging Well Resource Center in September, and with Senior Reach to just push that program out as far as we can in the community. Anybody can be trained in it, and everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows a person that can use that program. So it's not just for example, the city folks to learn, but also bus drivers, people delivering meals for Meals on Wheels, for example, church members, apartment managers, business people. There's just no end in sight. And South Metro Health Alliance is the main trainer for this program, but we've got our own, as I mentioned, so we'll be trying to do as much of that as we can. with the DRCOG assessment, we'll just be moving that forward and trying to draw some meaningful conclusions out of it, which I'm confident we will. For the Littleton Coalition on Aging Well, we will continue to move our programs, things that we come up with, and move that forward. And then I'll keep holding those collaborative meetings with the local governments. This is the last thing that I want to get started on fairly soon, the Community Assessment Survey on Aging, the CASOA, which has been done by a lot of communities, particularly in Jefferson County. We are participating with a number of communities. In fact, we've waited to get a better deal, really, to partner with all these folks and DRCOG. We're working with the National Research Center, and basically what this survey does is it gives us an idea of what our strengths and weaknesses are for helping older citizens in the community. It's for folks who are 60 and older, and our hope is that it will be administered in fall 2014, and we'll do a lot of PR around that. Probably the Littleton Coalition for Aging Well will really get involved in that. So, and then spring we'll have results, and then I feel like a lot of what we're doing in this first year is collecting information to find out what it is we need to be doing. And then I think year 2 will be a little bit more about getting started on doing the things that we need to get done. So that's what I've been up to. Does
Council
anyone have any questions?
Barry?
I do. So just the other day, I met with one of our citizens who was talking about emergency response plan for our seniors. And I'm going to assume that South Metro Housing Options does have emergency plans at their sites, but there are also a lot of other seniors out there throughout our city. And I was just wondering, if it isn't being addressed yet, will that be in your plans? Hopefully it will be.
I think it's something we'll definitely be talking about. Hugh Hillary has been hitting me on this one for a very long time. It's very important to him. So, yes, we'll look into that.
It's important to all of us, no doubt. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's who I had met with, too. And tying into the fire department, police department, as well as EMTs, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Move your microphone closer.
Is that, thank you, is that the type of response or
Type of
information
thing?
will be available at the resource center?
I think so, yeah. I think we need to do some research on that and figure out who the partners are and what the plans are. I don't know what information we'll find, but I would like to have that information there.
Great, thank you. Good job.
Other
Thank
questions?
you.
I'll mention a couple of things that have come up in other discussions. One is the aspect of trusted, being very important to this aspect of the community, particularly when you're dealing with it's not just the mental health, but the wariness that comes
Yep.
with the fragility that folks might have as they age. Another is access to information, and if that can be included in part of the survey when you talk about what do we need to be doing, the fact that a lot of information is internet-based, and yet for some folks on limited incomes, access to the internet comes with a subscription service that may be out of reach.
Right.
And so that's there. I love the aspect of not reinventing and
Yeah.
leveraging across. And another item to think about offering is when folks come in, if they have something to offer, if they have a level of expertise, for them to be involved and connected. That's come up in some of the discussions, which is it's not just senior resources too, but seniors have a lot of life knowledge.
Right. And I met with Eric, my buddy here at the city. His mom came in this past week, and she said, you should be keeping a list of all the people that want to volunteer and the people that want to do social stuff, or, you know, they come in looking for XYZ, and just start a list of those folks. So that's a neat idea. I tell people it's just like being a turkey. Every day is a whole new day. I get new ideas every day, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I just make it up.
Anything else, Council? Thank you very much, Kay. Excited to see the progress and looking forward to both September and October.
All right, thank you.
Excellent presentation, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kay. It's always hard to follow Kay. She does good presentations. I'm just lucky that way, I guess.
Yes, Chief.
Yes. So let me begin by obviously introducing myself. I'm Doug Stevens, Chief of Police here. And Danielle Trujillo, she's been helping us out with crime analysis, data analysis at the police department for a few months now. And you guys will be hearing more about her as we talk about budget later. And then obviously, everybody here knows Kim Ferber, Division Chief of Investigation Support Services for the police department. We were asked to come tonight and discuss Northeast neighborhood, kind of crime issues and data that we've looked at over the past few years, kind of where we're at, where we've been, where we're headed, and what our opinions are on, how we can get where we want to be. But I'm going to begin and kind of with a larger overview of where we're at in general in the city and where we've been over the last couple of years and where we are year to date compared to the last few years year to date. So we'll look at the first half of the last couple of years compared to the first half of 2014. And then we can talk about another thing I'd like to present to you tonight. I think it's a good opportunity for you to look at some of the tools we have available to us, that you have available to you, and the public has available to them whenever they want to go online and look at what's kind of going on real time in their neighborhoods as far as crime is concerned. So Danielle will give a very informative presentation on that. And then we'll take questions, and you shoot them out like you always do anytime you have any questions. So what we're going to look at first is a 3-year annual review, citywide, broad picture, where are we at in Littleton with crime and police services. And we're going to break them up into 2 different things, and we'll talk about that. And we'll start with crime incidents and calls for service. It's 2 different things on the graph over here. What you see on this top blue area here are what we call calls for service. The police department fields about 52,000 calls for service, basically, each year on average. You'll see here the numbers are a little smaller than that. What those are, these numbers are like in 2013, 35,175 calls for service. Those are the actual calls and activities that the police officers actually either self-initiated, which an officer was involved in that call on their own, or they were dispatched and responded to a call. The other 20+ thousand or 19,000, 18,000 calls are calls that come into our dispatch center that our dispatchers are able to field on their own and answer questions or refer people to another agency or resolve that however they can without sending an officer out. Does that make sense to everybody? So about 35,000 last year, 175 incidents that police officers responded to or initiated on their own. What you see on that top part on the calls for service is that we're seeing a decrease from 2012. And a trend line, you can see the trend is decreasing generally over the last couple of years. You see we're down 3.6% from last year, from 2012 to 2013. And the reason we're at 2013, that's a full year's worth of data. When we go into the second half, we'll talk about 2014, where we are now. But these are the last 3 full years worth of data that we're analyzing here. You see vehicle traffic stops accounts for 38.6% of all the calls for service. So that 35,175, almost 39% of that are just traffic related things where our officers are making traffic stops and those types of things. One of the things you may hear as council people is, and I hear it as the police chief, is don't speed through Littleton, which is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. A bad thing because, it's a negative contact for us sometimes. Nobody likes getting pulled over by the police, but it's a good thing because it enhances public safety, right? If we can reduce those speeds, reduce accidents, reduce injuries, it's a good thing. When you look at the 39%, some people, 39% of 35,000, roughly 15,500 annually, traffic stops, traffic incidents. When you break that down per shift, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 3 shifts a day, it really averages out to about two stops per officer per shift, per 10-hour shift. So it's both a proactive tool that we have to address a community issue that we hear about frequently when we're doing polling. One of the top concerns for citizens in Littleton, as you know, is traffic. But also it allows us an opportunity to be reactive too, where we'll focus our enforcement on higher accident locations and those types of things as well to try to get those numbers down and enhance safety. You can see vehicle and traffic stops increased by 19% since 2011. So what that means to me as well is that We have heard the community's request for us to be proactive and especially in high accident locations. We've answered that. We've also increased, we use traffic as a good tool to be visible in the community as well. There's a lot of models out there that talk about using data analysis and tying it in, crime analysis data in with proactive traffic stops to have visible police presence in higher crime areas. Just that presence of the overhead lights on can help reduce crime, research has shown. So we do a lot of traffic stops in an effort to be proactive, to be visible. Moving down here in the bottom part of the chart now, you're going to see crime incidents. So where the first one is calls for service, these are actual reported crimes that we take reports on. You can see that they've decreased overall by 8.7% from 2012 to 2013. It's a trend that's continuing into 2014, as you will see. You do see some property crime increases. They're increased down here from 2012 to 2013. You saw a 15% increase in thefts citywide. And thefts is mainly, it is for the most part, crime of opportunity. So when we talk about prevention factors, a lot of these are car break-ins or people leaving stuff unattended, garages open, those types of things where people see an easy target and they'll take advantage. And you see that a lot with vehicles. It's probably the #1 issue with car break-ins is that there's a visible high dollar item, a purse, a GPS unit, an iPod, an iPad, an this or that are in the vehicle. So some people will take advantage of that. They'll smash the window or cars are unlocked or whatever, and 2 seconds, that stuff's gone. And we see a continuing trend, not just in Littleton, but throughout the country of these types of things. Yes,
Yeah,
Peggy?
and I don't think this is on.
Yeah, it's
it
on.
is, okay. So on the property crime, can you break out the actual break-ins to houses or apartments or whatever versus the cars and so forth?
Yes, we can break it down by crime type. So if it's a break into a residence or an office or a building or something like that, it's a burglary. It's a different crime type. So we can break it down by a number of different crime types. And later in the presentation, when Danielle shows you the online reporting tools that we have, you will be able to see a long list of many, many crimes that we can click on to pull different data on.
And when you say we, that's anybody using the
Yes.
site, right?
Yep, it's open to the public. Yep, they can access it online. We just saw an increase of 40% change in Police District 4, which is south of Littleton Boulevard and just on the east side of the city. In thefts, 100 or more thefts in 2013 than there were in 2012. There's not really any specific geographic area. My immediate response to that was, well, that's King Soopers at shoplifting, because we get a ton of calls at the King Soopers. There at Broadway and Littleton Boulevard. Not now, because it's being rebuilt, but we'll probably see a huge decrease in 2014. But and when Danielle looked at it and we looked at it and went into more depth, it's really just all over the place. And it's a variety of those crimes, whether it's car break-ins or stuff left out that was just someone else helped themselves to. It wasn't really any one geographic area, not one real spree, so to speak. It was just there was an increase in that area that we can't really tie to any pattern or any individual or group at this time. Just go ahead.
I don't know whether you're going to get into this, but you're talking about the crime side of it. Will you get to accidents at all?
I hadn't planned on talking about accidents. I certainly can at another
Okay,
time. Yeah, and it's a whole different area. We can analyze a lot of data on that as well. And it's a fascinating subject, so we can talk about it. This breaks it down kind of, Peggy, like what you were talking about. These are just a few of the types of calls for service that we saw in the previous graph. This kind of breaks those down in a little more detail. You can see the traffic stop numbers, 13,592 in 2013. And then this breaks down the other top 5, basically, calls for service. One of the things I look for, and I asked Danielle to look for us, is when we're managing our resources and deploying our officers and everything we do, from how many police we have on the street to what time we're going to work and what are going to be our peak days for staffing and all that stuff is data driven. So one of the things I consistently look for in my experience are what are our top 5 types of calls, what are our top 5 locations, not only for crimes but for calls for service. What People are calling on noise disturbances that may not generate a police report. Nobody was arrested or there's no crime committed, but are we going to the same locations over and over and over? What times are they occurring? And this is some of that byproduct. These are our top 5 types of call, and then we'll look at that type of stuff. And now we're going to drill down a little bit more focused on this 3-year comparison into Police District 3, which covers the northeast neighborhood. And you see the same graph. We see the calls for service up there. Those are the ones, again, that the officers actually were physically present at and worked, either self-initiated or we received a call to respond. And then you see the crimes down here on the bottom. And as you see, our calls for service mirror the citywide decrease, and you also see a decrease in crime, again, mirrors the citywide picture. 26% incident decrease since 2012, with 256 less incidents occurring in 2013. So again, in the northeast neighborhood, you saw a very significant decrease in crime between 2012 and 2013, and I'll talk about that again here in a minute. That's basically weapons and drugs, mostly narcotics, prostitution type crimes. So those are the big 3. So narcotics, narcotics, weapons, and prostitution.
That's a huge decrease. So what might be attributing to that?
So it's a good question. You know, when it comes to crime reduction, or when it's crime reduction, it's because the police did a great job. When it's crime increase, it's socioeconomic factors. I just want you to know that. So it's hard telling, really. You know, we would have to drill in, and this is where data analysis is really important for the police department. But we could really drill into a focused look at, well, okay, we had 81 here, 73 here, and then we're down to 23. What was that? And look at those individual 23 incidents compared to the others. I just don't honestly have a good answer for you at this point. It could be a number of different factors that we would have to look into a little more.
Chief, I think police presence in some way, whether it's overheads going with the traffic stops, or being in the neighborhoods at night, or whatever it is, I think police presence has a lot to do with that. And I think you've really tried to up the presence up there, and I think that may be the outcome.
And I will talk about, thank you, and I will talk about that a little bit more, but our belief is that, in 2012, as you all are painfully aware, there were some really high-profile crimes in the northeast neighborhood, including a double shooting homicide on Fox Street that you're aware of. Some gang activity. The citizens in the community were very concerned. So in response to that, the police department in late 2012 and early 2013 spent a ton of time focusing some resources up there in the northeast neighborhood to address those issues and kind of, give the community a sense of safety and security again. And I think that you're seeing some of that here, like you were talking about, Councilman, is that there was a large increased presence up there. While it may not, it was reflected, here, and you see in the calls for service. Again, these are self-initiated activities as well. So you see officers going out, over 1,000 more times in that area, whether we did it on our own or whether, I think it's a combination of both, the community feeling comfortable to call us when they need us. And again, since this is televised, I'll throw it out there. You're never a burden to call. So if you see something suspicious, call. Please call. We want to go. We want to come. I can't tell you how many times, and you'll hear from me forever, that crimes have been solved and things have been prevented because someone picked up the phone and called the police. They feel silly, you hear it a lot. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to burden anybody. It's never a burden. Call us. So you'll see those increases there, a higher visibility, higher willingness maybe of the community to call us when they need us, and then you'll see, that catches up over here with a decrease in crime most likely. Okay? And we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to 2014 because that went back up a little bit. And this is what we're going to talk about now. So the 3-year, those were the 3-year total year comparisons. And now we're going to compare those same time periods basically with 2014. So the first 6 months, basically, the first 2 quarters of each year, okay? And here's what it looks like. Calls for service is significantly lower for 2014 in the first 2 quarters of the year compared to the last 3 years. So you would see a trend line here on calls for service obviously going up, right? Every year, more calls, more activity. 2014, it takes a big dive. Correspondingly, you also see a big dive in crime in 2014. So I'm okay with that because, when crime is down, people probably want less contact with the police, I'm guessing. So you would see, probably a little bit less likelihood of increased stops and those types of things for during that proactive time that we have available to us. So that correlates with the crime decrease a little bit. Another issue there too is because crime's down, we're probably receiving less calls from the community for our services. And that I think you're seeing that reflected at least in the first 6 months of this year. When we break that down a little bit, we see assists are way down. Assist is kind of a catch-all category. When people call in, the dispatchers will key it into the computer under another different categories. And assist ranges everything from, there's so many of them, and then my mind went blank. But basically, someone's stranded on the side of the road.
Locked out of my car.
Yeah, locked out of my car, or, hey, could someone just come by and talk to me about maybe my 13-year-old is acting up, that type of thing. Some of those get categories in that catch-all category. Although crime was steady the past 3 years, in the first 2 quarters, you can see there was a significant decrease in 2014 of 16.6%. And most importantly there, you see in the persons crime down here on the bottom, which is really good, you'll see a 10% decrease in persons crimes. So those are your assaults, your robberies, your sexual assaults, the serious crimes against persons. And then you see property crime decreased, arson and burglary had an abnormal increase, drawing our resources and attention. So in 2014, we had a little bit of a burglary spree earlier in the year. I'll talk about it here in a little bit. And then arson. Usually you don't see too many arsons, but we did have a kind of I can't even really call it a spree, but there was a flurry of arson activity a couple months ago in the community where someone was lighting shrubbery and plants and park things on fire, at our parks and things like that. No significant fires, really, but high frequency in a short time period. So we put out a lot of information to the officers, did a lot of patrol, and we contacted an individual, a juvenile, although we were not able to put any of the arsons on that person. They were cited for some other things. And once we had contact with that person and questioned them about the arsons and cited them for the other thing, they stopped. So we're guessing that person may have had some sort of involvement with that. But it did run our arson numbers up, which would be very low. But when you get 5 or 6 in a few days or whatever, it's going to shoot them way up. And that kind of shows an increase there.
So
Yes.
So if we eliminate 13 for a minute, then the property crime is actually a bit of a concern compared to 11 and 12, because it's going up. Most of the others are having different kinds of patterns, but that one is going up when several others, if you just look at 11 and 12, the others are pretty much going down.
That is correct, yes.
So that is something we want to probably try to educate people about how they can protect against that.
Right. So, yeah, and the increase in property crime is something that, one thing I talk about too is everybody focuses on crimes against persons. It's the blood crimes, as we call them. Those are the things you'll see on the media. Those are the things that people fixate on. They're really concerned. It's a lot of fear about, crimes against persons. The likelihood of someone being victimized on a crimes against a person or a blood crime, as we call it, is relatively low, very low, statistically speaking. But many more people in our community are touched regularly or more often or know someone who has been touched on a property crime. Yes?
So related to that personal crime stuff, is there an age group or anything that's affected more by that?
I think kind of depends on the crime you're talking about, but when you get to like assaults and those types of things, the younger, usually alcohol or drugs and violence go hand in hand. We'll see more assaults probably, and these aren't hard numbers that can be quoted, but just in my experience, you'd see, like the 18 to 24, 28-year-old more likely to be involved in your basic street fight, alcohol-related incidents. So you see they're more likely to do that. Violent crimes, it depends. In Littleton, our violent crime, like if, shootings and those types of things, extremely rare. But I think our experience has shown, and Division Chief Ferber may step in here if I misspeak, but I think that we'd see more incidents there like domestic violence type related incidents than random gang-related type incidents. Like in Denver, you would probably see more youth involved with violent crime, being shot and shooting people because of the gang issue, which we're just not carrying down here into Littleton, which is outstanding. When we do have violent crime, I think it's most likely domestic violence related in our community, and we just have not seen, at least in the year or so that I've been here, any like youth-related violent crime for the most part. But Peggy, when you go back to your question about property crimes, it's something that we're always looking for and constantly evaluating how we deploy our resources, a community education piece. And for example, we'll show you during Danielle's demonstration of the software that we have available to the community, what we did with that software internally and what we can do with it, what we plan to do with it, with very highly qualified and skilled analysis that goes with it, on how we can deploy our resources to help reduce those crimes. There's a lot of other things that we can get to, and we will talk about too, and can talk about. When you come to property crimes, a lot of that's environmentally focused too. So whether that's, there's a whole field on it called crime prevention through environmental design, CPTED. I know you're aware of it, and as all of you probably, but things that we can do in the community and the community can do for themselves, whether that's lighting improvements, landscaping improvements, just improvements in general, and how the community looks. Research has shown it will change how the community feels, and when the community feels positive about the way they look and they take pride in where they live, crime goes down. People take more ownership and are more likely to call the police, and so we can do traditional enforcement type things. But for us, a big piece of what we do as well is a proactive piece to get out there and educate the community on these are things you can do to help yourself reduce the likelihood of you becoming a crime victim, whether that's violent crime or more likely, in our case, property crime. And there's some very simple things, and we can do that. When it comes to reducing those property crimes and all crime, society crimes, the drugs and those types of things, especially like open air drug dealing in parks and on streets, lighting's good, different landscaping ideas are good. And I think it goes hand in hand with what we're doing here in Littleton, whether that be LIFT and the other opportunities there for redevelopment, or whether that be the community development grants that are available through the city, where individual homeowners or homeowners associations or businesses can apply for money to help do some of these things to help reduce crime. We're in support of that, and research shows that those do help reduce those types of crimes. This breaks that down basically just like you did before on what we're looking at for those in the first 6 months of those years. Again, traffic stops lead the way. Suspicious activity, we like this. 2 reasons. Suspicious activity is either someone's calling us because something just doesn't look right, which we totally support and encourage, or our officers are seeing something that doesn't look right to them and they're taking that initial action on their own. So I like to see that one as our number 2 because it means someone, whether it's us or the community, is being proactive. So we look at these types of numbers. We're looking obviously for where we headed, how we doing, and you can see we're fairly consistent. Now we're going to drill down into Police District 3, again, the Northeast neighborhood. And this kind of mirrors what we were talking about before, with the exception you'll see down here that crime is up in that neighborhood a little bit. So there was an 11% decrease in calls for service in 2013, since 2013, sorry, in Patrol District 3. So it continues that downward trend. 2012 was the peak in those calls for service. Again, that was the high crime year in that part of town, a lot of high profile incidents, or a few high profile incidents that, number 1, caused more people to call us, I think, and number 2, caused our officers to be up in that area much more and more focused. And then 2013, you see, 2013, you see coming back down to a normal level on calls for service. Big dump in crime in the Northeast neighborhood in 2013, which I think can be correlated to that increased police presence and the increased involvement of the community up there. And then you're seeing in 2014, we're back up about 10% coming back up a little bit. No significant increase in any particular type of crime there that we have able to identify. It's kind of all over the board on what drove that 10%, a variety of crimes.
So for District 3, how many districts do you have then?
6 patrol districts.
So give me the rough description of north, south, east, west.
So District 3 roughly is like Windermere east to Broadway and Littleton Boulevard north, roughly, as far as the police district goes. So one of the things that I'm looking at is and I don't know what it'll be if we do anything with it, but I'm looking at, do we need 6 police districts? Are we districted the right way? It goes a lot with, what we see here. When we break this down, and you'll see it here in a few minutes on the crime mapping, that, it's a larger period. We've had our police districts for 20-plus years, and is it time to maybe redraw our maps on how we patrol and staff? And so we'll look at this type of data to determine how can we be the most efficient and put the officers where we need them to be at the times we need them to be there.
So within District 3, is there a sub-area that gets most of the attention?
Well, I would say not necessarily, and obviously you know the area very well, as you all do, but when we look at crime, it just depends on what's happening when, really. And you could pull like a certain crime and a certain time range, and you'll see it a hot spot like in the northwest part of the district. You pull a different crime, a different time range, you'll get a hot spot in the southeast side of the district. So it's kind of all over the place, and it just depends on the factors that are going on at what given time. And but I think that you'll see when we get to a later map, it may help answer some of that question a little bit, although it's data, so it's fun, right? So this is going to be a little bit more in depth in the weeds. So this data now is a different mapping system that is not available to the public, okay? It's just beyond the capacity of the system that we have, but this is the stuff that Danielle did for us, breaking it down, doing her own GIS layers on this to get census block. So when we're talking about, and it's kind of a nice segue there, Councilman, thank you. When we're talking about police districts, council districts, whatever, those are big geographic areas, right? For us, we'd like to drill it down a little bit more, and when you see, we're going to really drill down here in a minute. But we went by census block on this one. So basically, Littleton is comprised of, each one of these little orange outlines here is a census block, and so we'd like to look at that. Provides us some similar type of data through the census that we can use to combine with our own data analysis to get what we get. And you'll see here that this dark outline here is the data or the area that we were asked to kind of focus in on, and it kind of went with a prior project that council was working on, and so that's why that area is outlined there. And that's the area that when we were using the previous slides on Northeast Neighborhood, that's the area and the drill down area in Northeast Neighborhood that we dealt with. It wasn't the entire section of Patrol District 3. But what you see here is when we go back and we look at, this is year to date, so the first 6 months, right? So through January through June, where we're at in Littleton. One of the things I like to look at, and we try to use a 28-day cycle for us to see the last previous 4 weeks about what's hot and what's not, basically. And this is for the last 6 months, and you can see, the Santa Fe corridor, and, the downtown area. This is Littleton Boulevard right there, Main Street. You can see that's our area right here, and this is calls for service again. So these are areas either we're being called to or our officers are taking proactive enforcement or calling things out on their own. And so here we have the white areas are the average to the below average areas. The yellow areas are the average to slightly above average areas. And then the red area is the statistically significant higher area for our calls for service.
And there's little residential in that area, is that right?
Well, it kind of, this is the Santa Fe corridor, so you know what's on there. And then this part in here is just the north part of downtown. So yeah, comparative to the rest of the city, yes, limited residential area. Councilman?
Chief, when your analysts looked at that, were they able to take out the calls that somehow came to this building, but really weren't, this building wasn't part of it?
So I think the question is, did you subtract out headquarters?
So what we did is we actually subtracted out those handled by dispatch calls, and so the majority of those calls are the ones that are the calls that would be handled out of this building. So that's why we eliminated those.
So
it does help eliminate, so it won't skew the numbers.
Thank you.
Yes.
Tim, I'm sorry, Bruce, I don't quite get where you're.
Well, a lot of times, a call comes to this building, but it really didn't happen here. A dispatcher handled it. It may have come from another state, came in, it come from another community, but a call for service number was initiated, and the only address that would have existed in the city for it would have been this one, but it really wasn't something.
As a default.
It really wasn't. But that is kind of the football, that.
And you'll see we have it broken down by actual crime as well here as we move forward in some of the later slides. But here, The census block to us is nice as well because it drills down a little bit more detail, but we want even more than that. So Danielle was able to go in and actually go by actual block. So every block in the city, she broke it down and was able to then go through and give us, this is kind of an overlayer map with a couple different layers on there, obviously. So you continue to see the calls for service by census block, right? And then where in those census blocks are we seeing the largest areas more detailed down now, more drilled down? And what you see here are the actual streets. And you see again, the average to below average would be just regular street line. The average to slightly above average would be a blue line. And then the dark black line is a statistically significant above average, which just means that compared to the surrounding areas, you probably know more about this than I do, I was just coached. But that just pops out as being, compared to its neighbors, a little bit more frequent activity there. And then the northeast neighborhood area is still blocked out up there. You can see that. So what we use this for is when we talk about where do we need to be and where are the areas where our officers are doing most of their work and we're getting the most calls from. One thing I need to do and want to do and we're not capable of doing yet is I want to separate out our self-initiated activity from our incoming calls. So for these maps, I have no idea if, say, this section right here, this black cluster right there, which I think is Powers and Bannock, right in there, that cluster of black, which shows, a higher incident of calls for service, is that because our officers are there making a ton of stops, or is that because the community, the residents in those apartments across the street there are calling us a lot? And we don't have that capacity yet. We're working on that. So those are things that we want to be able to drill down and figure out where do we need to be, when do we need to be there, who's calling us, and what are they calling us for, and how can we address that in a long-term crime prevention and reduction strategy. Peggy, did you have a question?
Yeah, so in the call for service, what if 5 people see the same thing and call?
So usually what will happen on a calls for service is they'll combine the number, right? Or no, or yeah. It's one call, yeah. So what they'll do is they'll add on information to the original call.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll move on into crime now. So we take the previous maps that you've seen, and we add on another layer. So we're adding on the actual crime incidents now in these areas. And what we did here, this is like what we call a heat map, right? So it's Danielle can describe it in much more detail than I can, but basically where it's red it's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to see a little bit higher area there where we would want to focus our efforts because that's where the crime is occurring more proportionally than in the other areas. So again, backing up, we have the census blocks and then the streets, and then now we just overlaid the crime map on top of that. And the census blocks and the streets are talking about calls for service, and the red is just the crime on top of it, reported crimes. So what we would like to see then is we have a lot of, not a lot, but a disproportionate amount of crime right in this area right here, but we also have a lot of calls for service and police activity in there as well. So on its face, it looks like, we are spending time where we need to spend time to, affect crime in the neighborhood. What this means to me, though, is I need more data, and I want to drill down even further, which we do internally. Break this down. What do we have going on down there by crime type, by date of the week, by time, and all that good stuff, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we just broke it down by the different types of crimes. So person crimes, same type of thing, overlaid on the same maps. And then property crimes, you see a little more wide-reaching. Again, property crimes being crimes of opportunity. And I think in this area here, you see much higher density of housing and just a lot more people there. Commercial business activity, a lot of unattended vehicles. People are spending time downtown. They're spending time in the parks. They're spending time, in those places. And those crimes of opportunity arise. So it's an education piece. It's a prevention piece where people just need to learn and know that, lock up your stuff. Don't keep your stuff visible. And that's on the thefts and things. And obviously there are things in here that are less preventable, like burglaries and things like that. But, when it comes to our numbers being higher, it's usually on those crimes of opportunity. Yes?
Just one question, Chief, just to look for a drill down at some point in time. Broadway Mineral, on that northeast corner is the hospital and the healthcare complex. Is that just where it's reported, or is that actually happening on that property? I'm not.
That's probably,
That's the hospital.
we do get thefts and things from the hospital, so I can't say it's a lot. One of the things when we look at with these types of maps, it could be statistically significant, but be a very low number. So in relation to other things around it, maybe we had 5 thefts in the hospital in 6 months. But compared to the area around it and the areas we're comparing it to, that's significant. And is that correct, Danielle? Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. You'll see on this next one, high school, and these are our drug offenses mainly, driving those numbers. So when you get a kid at the school caught with marijuana or whatever, that's a society crime. They get a ticket, and that type of thing. So that's why these pop out. And so you'll see those types of things.
And options on there is not colored in, like one of our high schools?
Well, it did not pop up because there weren't as many crimes. So Heritage and Littleton High School had a higher frequency and a more statistically
Yeah,
significant.
Was it middle school off of Lowell? I mean, west of
Lowell and,
Goddard.
Goddard?
yeah.
That's interesting.
And again, it's in relation to other things. So it could be a relatively low number. Those are things that, if we choose to, we could give the exact numbers and those types of things if people, as we look into that. So if we were just to look at this slide and say, we got some issues at the high schools and the middle schools, maybe. If you look at it on its face, these things pop out. What kind of numbers are we looking at, really? And then how do those relate to the rest of LPS? And then how do they relate to Denver Public Schools or Cherry Creek Schools or Jeffco Schools, in relation? So comparing apples to apples and that type of thing. So that's the type of stuff that we do through our data analysis. And then this is the other category. The other category is just basically anything not covered by persons, people, or society crimes falls into the other. So these are your more minor type incidents. And then I'm going to ask Danielle to come up if you guys would like and give you kind of a little crash course on what is available to you and the community as far as a crime picture in the neighborhood. And it's what we call raids online. So, Danielle?
Oh, yeah, plenty.
So the chief actually asked me to present this in order for us to have greater collective efficacy. And so we can only do so much as a department and deploy so many resources in specific areas because we're limited by the amount of people that we have. And so in part of us reaching out to the community, we want to increase collective efficacy and have community members work with us in order to help solve crimes or give us information that can help lead us to being more efficient. And so part of what we want to highlight is an online tool that we have that we've invested in as a community in order to increase our working capacity. And so the first place we need to go is to the internet and go to the littletongov.org website. And when we get there, sorry, I'm going to kind of steer us through. You just go to the departments, and we're going to be under the police department. And from here, we're actually going to go, sorry, let me scroll down a little. The news and crime reporting. And so you'll go to the crime reports. And here it'll bring you to our website, that's Raids Online. What it'll ask you to do is to accept an agreement that they have. And I already have it open to the area that we wanted to focus on tonight, which was that northeast neighborhood. And so what I wanted to show you is a few features that are very cool, I think, that.
Danielle,
And
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Can you just back up and get there one more time?
I sure can.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go to littletongov.org.
That's our Littleton website, okay.
Yep. And then when you go to departments, You scroll down to the police department. Oh, sorry, I clicked too
It's
soon.
a good-looking picture right there.
Yeah, hair though.
I know. I don't know what happened. It's gone.
And then news and crime reports.
News and crime, thank you.
And then from here, you'll have a few options, and so you'll just click on the crime reports. You're welcome. Okay, and so now we're at Raids Online. And so this is a resource that we contribute data to, and so do other agencies in the metro area. And what we do is we upload crime data to them every single day. And so we're able to look at crime data every day, or members of the community are as well. And they don't have to just look for Littleton, they can look at surrounding areas as well. So this is what I'm gonna show you is, when we come in, we can actually type in an address, so it can be a 100-block number, or we can type in an intersection, and that would take us to that specific point. So what I've decided to do is do Delaware Street and Crestline Place, because that's about the center of that northeast neighborhood. And what I want to do is I want to put on a buffer area, and I want to say I want to make it about a half mile. So I want to see anything that's going on within that half mile. And I only want to display crimes in that buffer area.
And this is something any of us can do.
Correct. Anybody can go online and do this. So you
Even
can type in your
teenagers.
specific address. Let's say you're looking at a property, or you want to know if there's something going on near your kid's school or at a relative's house or anything like that. Any address can be put in there. And so it isn't just limited, like I said, to Littleton. This can actually go outside of Littleton. And so you can look at any of those addresses as well.
And how current?
So it's as good as midnight.
Well, it depends on whether the report's been filed yet, right?
Correct.
Yes, once the report is finalized in the records management system, then it
Yeah,
will go,
because-
automatically feeds to this.
Because when I was trying to find one that did occur in my neighborhood, then I was told, well, the report wasn't probably filed yet, for understandable reasons. I'm not saying that, so
Right.
the crime might have happened a day or so before.
You're correct.
And the report's not in yet.
The process usually is that the initial responding officer will complete a report. Most times, the report is complete for filing purposes. It'll go to the detectives. And once the that report is approved by a supervisor and forwarded to the detectives, it goes on here. So that way, like if we're working many of these cases obviously are active cases that we're working, burglaries, assaults, whatever. They're still open cases, but they're up here because the initial report has been approved and forwarded. So, but there are some times when our officers have to do follow-up report before they'll submit it, and that's probably what you're talking about there, where there may be a delay.
Yeah, and that was not a complaint at all.
No, that's just a process that everybody should know about. So it may have happened to others too, where people are looking for a specific thing. What frequently may happen is, neighbors obviously will talk. If they say, well, I saw a lot of police cars out in the street last night, I wonder what happened. Maybe they'll go to this and they'll punch it in and it shows nothing because it hasn't really hit the system yet. Maybe the report needs to be finalized the next day. And then they'll go back a couple days later and they'll see that, it may have been something. And so it's a very valid point.
Great question, thank you. Some other features that it has is that you can sign up for crime alerts, and then there's an app for your iPhone as well. Okay. So what's great is that there's some tabs up top that we can look at as well. There's the map view, there's a data grid, so it actually just gives you a list of those crimes that we're looking at. There's an analytics tab, which gives you more information about the crimes. And then the metadata, which is one of the questions that you asked. Records being uploaded, when was the last time they were uploaded? This would tell you all of that information. Okay, so let's go back to the map view. And so the first thing that we want to focus on are theft from motor vehicles. And so I can actually choose that, as a crime. And so listed on the left are all of those crimes that you want to look at. So we talked earlier about burglary. So all the property crimes are going to be in this category right here. So burglary, theft, fraud, shoplifting, burglary from motor vehicle. Up top are all those people crimes. okay? Homicide, sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault, and we go down to the bottom. We have those other crime types, or those society crimes, and then the other category. Okay, so you can kind of see that they're listed in the same way that we presented them earlier. So you can choose what crime you'd like. So we chose the theft from motor vehicles, okay? And what's great here is that we can actually choose a date range that we want to look at. So we talked earlier about that 28-day range, that's 4 weeks of good information, and that actually gives us enough information to compare if we're having a problem or not. And so we type in the 28 days and it'll automatically populate that for us. And then it's going to show us all of those crimes that occurred in that 28-day range in that buffer area. One of the great tools that it has is an analytic layer on the public side that's a density map. Okay, and so we talked a little bit about those densities of where there was statistically significant amounts of crime. We know that those were statistically significant. This density map is just going to show us where are there clusters of crimes that are close by each other. Okay, so it doesn't mean that this is a significant hotspot. It just means that this is where things are happening. And so when we do this, we click calculate, and it'll actually show us that little hotspot there. Okay, the other cool feature is that we have patrol zones, and there's different types of layers here that agencies can contribute to raids online. And so other agencies have neighborhoods, police districts, things like that. And so ours are our patrol zones that we've contributed, but it's something that we could definitely contribute in the future, is maybe that neighborhood layer, so that way community groups could look at it by their neighborhood. Okay, and so what we know is this is what's going on in the 28 days, and then if I look at the last 2 weeks, all of those crimes have disappeared. And so one great thing that we did around that same time is we actually made an arrest, and so officers were patrolling in the right places at the right time and found 3 girls that were actively pursuing cars and looking to break into cars, and openly admitted that and had plenty of property that did not belong to them on them. So officers were able to take them into custody, and that contributed to the decrease the 2 weeks after. So when we're able to deploy resources in the right area, or people are able to call us because they know that they're having a problem in their areas and tell us, hey, there's some suspicious activity going on, then that helps contribute to us reducing those crimes in the future. So the other piece we wanted to look at was thefts. And what we notice is we can do the same thing and just click on thefts now. And we can still choose that 28-day range. And now we just need to recalculate that density map. Okay, and so it looks like we have 2 kind of clusters of crimes. And we looked into these further using internal information. We noticed that the hotspot up here was those crimes that were highly preventable. So people leaving things on their porches or garage doors open, pieces that the public could definitely help us with through crime prevention. So better lighting, having motion sensors, so that way you would know when people are coming into your yard or not, especially in those early morning hours. That's when these crimes occurred. One great thing that I have access to is the internal side of this software. And so we have the external side, which the public is able to see, and then we have an internal piece too that has a few more features that I can utilize in order to help us give better predictive areas for officers to go into and spend time. And so one feature that we're rolling out next month is the ability to focus resources in the right areas, so that way we are putting our resources where they need to go according to how the crime has occurred and the patterns that it's occurring in. So not only do we have links that these cases are associated with each other, but we also have links through times of day and how crime moves. So if crime is occurring maybe south and it's starting to move north, the predictive maps can help us in order to see where the crime movement is going to occur. Yes.
So now everybody's watching and hearing this. What I would do if I were some person who wanted to be mischievous here is to see where the crimes were, figure you guys are going to put folks out there, and by golly, I see the vehicles out there. Now I'll go to the other places.
Well, luckily, you're much smarter than most criminals, so I'll just lay it out there.
I suspect somebody will catch on here, so. But anyway, this is great. It is an interesting, all the time, keeping on top of it.
Well, and just like you said, crime does move. So in a lot of places, what we know is when we allocate a lot of resources to a specific area, we're not always necessarily solving crimes right there, we're displacing it. And so criminals do move. They know where we're spending time, and they understand if we're doing the same cycles. And so that's why when we utilize data in order to deploy resources, we actually do a better job of going to many spots and not just one specific intersection or one specific neighborhood all the time. Instead, we're going to where the crime potentially is going to occur, and then we know where it will displace to. So a lot of that has to do with the movement of crime. So that's exactly what we're trying to do. So when we look at the burglary for motor vehicles or the theft from motor vehicles, instead of looking at that 28-day period, we want to focus on a little bit bigger range of data. And so what we want to look at here is a 6-month range period, right? Because that's what we looked at before, Q1 and Q2, to say what was our problem. We had an increase in thefts. And so what we're looking at then is that 6 months of data. And instead of doing just the density map, I have access to what we call a prediction zone. Okay, and so what we do is we're actually calculating a prediction zone based on the crimes that have occurred over those 6 months. And we want to look at that 28-day cycle, and we'll calculate it. And what it's going to come back and tell us is with what rate of accuracy, are we going to be able to predict the next crime that will occur. And so it gives us some numerical terms here, so if any of you are mathematicians, you'll understand this. But it tells us with what accuracy can we say where the next crime will occur. Sorry, and we've kind of moved out of view again. And so if we focus resources in the right areas, then we're able to help potentially prevent those crimes. And so that's the next piece that we're rolling out internally to officers is where are those predictive zones so that way we can better spend time there and potentially reduce crime in the future. Any questions about any of these pieces? Perfect.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, so, yes.
Just with your prediction tool, I think it's interesting, but how do you test the validity of it? So if you put more resources in an area, it's sort of like what Peggy said, if you put more resources in an area and the crime doesn't materialize, how do you validate the accuracy of the prediction out of curiosity?
Right, so actually there's a lot of different tools in order for us to utilize, but so what you're looking is for the crime to go down in a specific area. And so what you can do is you're going to calculate how much time you spent there. And so what we do is we actually compare the call for service time. So we talked a little bit before about, is it a proactive measure that an officer took on their own, or was it that there were calls there? And so in order for us to better calculate whether or not, if we're spending time in this area, we have to be able to see how much time we're spending there and how the crime looked. And what you'll look for is, did the crime actually displace? And so when we're spending time in a certain area, the crime will tend to move, and you'll be able to follow whether or not you actually displace the crime. And then if we can see how the crime moves, which this tool also does, but we do with a lot of further analysis using ArcGIS, we actually see where it moves to, and then we're following where we're moving to. So you have to follow it for a longer period of time. It won't be something that we'll be able to see in a month. It'll be something that we'll have to look at over 6 months. But there's actually, one of the tools that we talked about earlier, looking at crime and traffic safety, accidents, things like that. Data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety is actually a model that's been used in order to allocate resources to very specific areas at specific times.
Right.
And we can actually say that we are reducing the crime in those areas.
So hypothetically, if you're addressing the area you've got highlighted up there, and your activities are causing crime to relocate, in theory, it could relocate outside the city limits. So are you coordinating this type of activity with, in that instance, something like Englewood, so that they're aware of what we're doing, such that they can be equally proactive at the same, concurrently?
So what would happen there is just, you'd see a bunch of people lined up in the center line on Bellevue. No.
And then you got them.
Yeah, so the one thing that we do try to do well is coordinate our activities with our surrounding jurisdictions. The one thing that is important for us with the addition of Danielle, when she's been helping us out the last few months, is the analysts actually get together and do a tremendous amount of work together to share that. Obviously, crime doesn't care about borders and boundaries, right? So it'll go everywhere, and you'll see that a lot. You'll see, just tonight, a bulletin came out from Douglas County on vehicle break-ins, and there's been, numerous events in multiple jurisdictions that they believe are tied to these same individuals, done through, analysis through their analysts and other analysts, and then they work together to develop long-term strategies and how we're going to deal with that. When it comes to the actual, like on that scenario that we just gave, we're going to add resources to this area. You might want to be on the lookout that it might be headed your way. We share the information. We're experiencing this. They know that there's a good chance it's crossing back and forth. They're probably experiencing the same thing.
Right.
So that's kind of how that works. One other thing that Danielle touched on briefly, but this is just one of many tools available out there that we would do. And Danielle and I have worked in the past together on gang violence. And if you had a couple hours extra to spend, she can go into a very detailed model that she used for predictive analysis on preventing gang shootings. Where we would have an issue between two gang sets, she was able to go in and use multiple different databases, whether it's parole, probation databases, these types of things, other crimes occurring in the area, and do a predictive mapping analysis of these are the likely areas based on who lives there, who they're associated with, the types of crimes that have occurred in the neighborhood. Many different tools added together to give us at least an area to look at, with some sort of statistical, backing to it. Cops are pretty good at trusting their guts and based on experience, trying to be in the right places at the right time, but this is an additional tool. But this is just a one real basic option that we have available to us now, but there are a lot of different things that we look at. Yes.
So when you do the predicting, and somewhere in there, you also have arrested people, maybe about the time you're doing the predicting, then how do you do your analysis to factor in that you've taken somebody out of the game?
Right, so there's actually, in ArcGIS, they have a lot of correlation tools, and so you're able to actually put all of your data in that says, this is where we've spent our time, and this is where we've actually made arrests, and use very specific location-based data. So everything has to do with the place instead of the people. So it's all about the environment and the places. And so it looks at that geographically and says, okay, these two things actually correlate. So if you did spend time in this place, and then you made an arrest in this place, and this is where the crime was occurring, then you spent time in the right places, and they correlate together. And so,
So you were talking about predicting where the crime was going to happen.
Right, so-
It didn't happen yet, so,
well, what we have to do when we're looking at the predictive piece is, in order to validate that our tools are going to work, we have to use past data. And so, like the chief was talking about, In Denver, we use something called risk terrain modeling. And so what you look at is you look at 6 months to a year of past data in order to look at your prediction zones and see if you're able to predict with accuracy where the problems will occur next. And then you put the new data on to say, did it occur where I said it was going to occur? And if it does, then you have a valid model. And so once you build a model, then you're able to actually use the model in the future. And so that's how we know with accuracy.
So Peggy, what she's saying is if you go watch the movie, The Minority Report, by next year, Chief will be able to do that.
I wish.
Thank you, Tom Cruise.
Yes. So the one thing too is for these types of tools, for us, it's predictive. It's not an exact science, but it does give us an option. We started on a northeast neighborhood. That's kind of why we were asked to come tonight. You got way more than you asked for probably on what we're doing. But what we would do for our 6 patrol districts, if we have an officer assigned to each particular district, they can even go in, and Danielle didn't touch on this, but they can go in and build their own dashboard, as we call it on here. You can pull up your own patrol district and get an individual basic feedback on what's been going on in my district, use all these tools for your own. So when we have the officers spread out throughout the city and they're not responding to a specific call, they can spend some of their available free time to go out there and patrol in these areas and not necessarily sit there on the street and look for the burglar or look for but make a traffic stop in the area where the predictive software says we may see something. We're visible, it may deter something, it may not, but it gives us kind of like a focus area rather than just drive around and see what we see. It's at least patrolling with a purpose, and our officers do a good job of that as is, but this just gives them another tool. Any other questions?
Just want to compliment you, Chief, for bringing professional crime analysis back into the police department.
Thanks.
It's going to help you in many ways, and I'm sure you're going to be coming to us with a budget issue, but this is a great way for the department to work smarter.
Oh, thank you.
And I came away with the catchphrase, patrolling with a purpose.
Yes. Put that on our car. Yeah.
Thank you, that was
Thanks.
fascinating.
Thanks.
Thank you, and no, it is a science on one level in trying to do it, and so it's just predictive and not necessarily absolutely accurate all the time. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Danielle. Okay. And now it's our opportunity to talk trash and turn it over to, you need a break? Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break and come back promptly.
That's great, Chief. Thank you. That was good stuff.
few months or so ago, had brought the idea to council based on a model that Thornton was using on having a city-run trash service. And we discussed it a little bit and then asked staff, yeah, there was enough interest from council to pursue a little bit more information on it. It was clearly going to be a decent amount of research, which is why I needed to get council's blessing to move forward. What we do know also is that it's a pretty substantial cost just to start up, because you have to buy the equipment, you've got to get the staffing, you've got, there's a lot of stuff that we haven't even really realized, hauling fees and dump fees and all of these things. So regardless of whether we want to continue to, if we decide we want to continue to look into that or not, it's probably at least a 9-month to 1-year project on analyzing the information, getting what we need to make really a solid decision. That's a substantial amount of staff time. And so what I'd like to suggest is that since we started talking about it, I don't know if you guys have been hearing some community response, but I've been hearing quite a number of folks have emailed me, called me, and talked to me at our outreach events, very receptive to the idea of doing something to eliminate the vehicles, the trash vehicles, similar very much to what Sheridan did, to contract with 1 or 2 or, however many companies that you end up, makes logical sense to contract with, and having a more coordinated trash pickup in the community that lessens the impact. It's something we've talked about before. It's something that we've bantered about a bit. And this evening, I guess, is the ask tonight is if we want to continue to pursue looking at the citywide trash service at this point, or if we want to put that kind of on a back burner, I would suggest that we put that on a back burner only because of the amount of time it would take. We do have a lot of other things that are probably more urgent issues that staff are dealing with. And I also think that we have more urgent budget issues at this point. So while I think it probably has some viability and would be something that I'd like to not see drop off the radar completely, particularly because we do have some interest from some of our communities or neighboring communities to partner on something like that, but they also are not in a place to make that decision probably within the next couple of years anyway. So then the ask would be, is to, I just lost his name, Inglewood City Manager. Devin.
Oh, Sheridan is Devin.
Sheridan. Geez, city and name. Devin. Oh, City Manager in Sheridan, who has just gone through the process of looking at a contract company for the city of Sheridan, and has a lot of depth of information, a lot of experience, a lot of what you want, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you look for, what you don't look for, what you can get. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have him come in to a study session in the near future. We would have liked to have had him this evening, but he had a conflict. And have a little bit more discussion with someone who's actually lived through it in a community close enough to ours. I think we can have some understandings. And then based on that kind of conversation, see if that is something that council would like to move forward with and doing a little bit, having staff put a little bit more time in. I talked to City Manager Penny, and he indicated that, and you can chime in, that the staff time would really be putting together the kind of the RFP if we wanted to go that direction, and then the analyzing and then bringing that back to council, making some decisions at that point. But I guess at this point it would be, are you guys okay with putting the city municipal idea kind of on a back burner? Not completely letting it go away, because I don't think, I think we had some feet, we had some grip with that one before, but based on all the things I've said, I think it might be a good idea to just put that back. And then to have Sheridan come in at a study session, hopefully in the next couple months, and kind of give us a little bit more detail and information so that we can decide if we want to do something there or not. I'm basing it largely on the fact that I'm hearing a lot of feedback from the community, and I think that we could probably do a little bit more outreach with some of our stuff, and some of our online stuff, to try to get even a better barometer from what the community feels about that too. And I don't know, Michael, when there's another city survey going out or not.
Yeah, we've gotten, so Councilman Brinkman's accurate. It'd be relatively easy for us to put this together. We have talked to Sheridan, and they successfully went through this process. I believe they have one service provider now for the city, and I think my recollection from the last council discussion is there was much more interest. There was interest in continuing to evaluate the city being in the municipal service, but a lot more interest in looking at contracting out some natural segment of the city to different service providers. And so we've started that analysis. The RFP is relatively easy together. It's pretty well laid out in state statute what we need to do. And so if there's interest in that, we can begin that process and again bring Sheridan in so you guys can hear lessons learned, what they ended up with, what worked. We may be able to get more than just Devin and get one of the elected officials from Sheridan as well. So an easy ask to do.
Just briefly, can you refresh our collective memories on what we are allowed to do in that area and what we're not allowed to do?
Yeah, so basically, and I'm going to forget the number exactly, but it's single-family residence and multifamily up to, I think it's 6 or 7 in that range, and that's it. That's what you can manage. So it's a relatively small amount, and then you can divvy up the city and whatever you feel is appropriate. You could have one service provider and then require that service provider picks up that encompassing single-family and up to 7, whatever the number is, multifamily.
Then we could, theoretically, or we could divvy it up into different areas and
Yeah,
let
what
them
makes,
bid.
yep, yeah, if you decided
we
you
chose.
wanted, it made sense, if we had, say, 20,000 units that fell into that category, or 10,000 units, and it made natural sense, you wanted to break it at Ridge, you could do it that way too.
Okay.
So, and you go through it, there's a RFP process, there is a waiting process, I believe it's about 6 months, to allow the existing service providers to address the change of business model absent that section of Littleton or all of Littleton if they're not the service provider. You cannot do greater than those 7 units and no commercial. Can't require that.
And so, I guess maybe one other question is, if the main, I would say, I don't know if this is necessarily the main, there's obviously, there's an air quality issue, but there's certainly an impact on the roads, which, when we talked about this before, was, multiple trucks driving over the same roads over and over and over. There's not any viable way to put a hypothetical surcharge on the trash collection service within the community in order to help recover the cost of the incremental road depreciation, is there?
I don't believe so. We'd have to check with our legal staff, but I don't think you can pick a type of user out there.
Yeah.
And the user fee or our licensing fee has to be commensurate with the cost of our service. And so it's probably a stretch to say that our cost of getting that license includes degradation of the roadway. So I'd venture to say the answer is no.
Okay, that's fair.
I'll confirm.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can check on that, but I think I probably see FedEx down my street more than a trash service truck, but.
I hear you. I just was, it was mainly curiosity. I didn't know if anybody else had done it or if there was latitude, but I understand.
I think this is the most common way that communities have really tried to look at those quality of life, air quality issues, impacts on the roads, is to say, we want to minimize the number of trash trucks that are driving, and we're going to contract with a service provider to minimize that.
Makes sense.
And especially in those more core residential areas, because you can limit it. You're not going to limit it if it's a small residential at the end of a commercial street, because you've got the commercial traffic anyway.
Jerry?
And it may be because I was the only one opposed to this when we first talked about it. I received a substantial amount of emails, calls, and just eyeball to eyeball, people who are opposed to being told what trash service they have to use to take away options from them. I don't think we're ready to, I would not be in favor of us going out for an RFP at this time. As far as what you were suggesting, put it on hold, I'm okay with that, getting more information. If this is all about roads being damaged, then that's what we need to talk about. Because I think there must be a waiver or something on trash trucks anyway, because they exceed some weight limit, I presume. Is that correct? I mean, they weigh a lot, I know that. But if it's all about the roads being damaged, and maybe that's what we should be talking about, not just jumping to, let's tell people what trash service they're going to have to use.
So, question is to the group, and what's the sentiment, is to bring in for more information or not?
I'm in no rush. I think right now we need to do work on code enforcement. We need to get the planning board involved with redevelopment of our city. They're still talking about the process for looking at neighborhood plans. We have other things that we should be focusing on besides taking on a whole nother task here.
Other sentiment? Randy?
Well, I first of all salute Councilmember Brinkman for coming to us and saying, I thought I had a great idea and it may yet still be a good idea, but we don't know yet. And she's decided not to tax staff with that. I think what I heard her characterize as being significant expenditure, but to invite an elected official and a city manager or a deputy city manager and from Sheridan to have a 40-minute discussion, I think we have only things that we can learn from them and really nothing to lose. So I'm highly supportive of that.
So I will say in the last two elections that I was in, the wear and tear on the streets from the trash was the most common thing that I got feedback about, apart from people driving too fast, taking their kids to school. So certainly there's some sentiment out there about it, but I don't know, I mean, that was volunteered to me, so I don't know how many people might have thoughts that I didn't get to talk to, whatever. Can we not maybe put some questions out for citizens' comments?
We have done it, and we've received very few comments. A lot of people looking at it, but not actually many comments.
And that was recent, was it?
Correct.
Yeah, because I think I just remembered seeing that. Could we stir up some more comments?
It was on there for our standard amount. That's what we got.
Whoa. So it's not a sexy question, I guess.
Bruce and Bruce?
I'm pretty much in agreement with most everything Debbie said about the reasons why we might not want to pursue it at this time. I'm kind of in agreement with Jerry that I don't know that I would want to go to an RFP or anything like that at this time. But when we have our Tri-Cities meetings, that might be a topic that we could take, already scheduled time and ask Sheridan to spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes talking about what they've done. There would be some knowledge there to gain. I do receive concerns about the number of trash trucks going up and down the road with five to seven trash services running 10-ton trucks. It's an issue.
Yeah, I think the next Tri-City meetings already has an agenda, so it'd be 2 meetings.
The one after that, then.
Well, I guess two things. I mean, yeah, I'm okay with, agree with Debbie. The city-oriented service, defer. I don't have a problem with having Sheridan come in and, for a 30-minute presentation at a study session when we've got bandwidth. I'd be interested to hear what they said, how they did what they did. But I think also Jerry's got a fair point. Do we have an agenda item at some point for the road inventory, and then what?
It's part of the budget process.
Oh, so it's going to be in that, and then does it make sense to maybe do that in advance of, if it's a big ticket item kind of thing?
I don't think they're tied to each other ultimately. I mean, you've got whether roadway, whether degradation of the road or number of trash trucks in general in terms of neighborhood quality, that decision to break the city up into some service is a question unrelated to the quality of the roadway that's there, in my opinion. I'm not sure that there's a correlation with that.
Okay, so on this policy-oriented topic, I'm okay with having Sheridan come in and get more information.
Yeah, you're going to, I mean, absent this conversation, we still are going to talk about how do we go from about a threefold increase in the amount of money that we expend on our roadway system.
That's the question
That's,
yeah, that's a good conversation to have.
those trash trucks are still going to be on there.
I understand, okay.
No, we have a report, though. I thought an analysis.
That's what Bruce is talking about.
But aren't we, I realize that, but why can't we look at the report before budget time?
Well, it's included in the budget as part of that discussion.
Why can't we look at the report prior to the budget?
You probably can if you want. I don't know if we have time on our council.
It's a very in-depth report.
I haven't seen it, so I can't tell you. All I know is the numbers that came through from the budget cycle.
I'd like to review when it's available.
Okay, yeah, I think it's in draft. Yeah, I don't know what it is. So,
Okay, Deb?
Well, when I first brought the idea of a municipal trash service in, it was primarily due to conversation with another community, that the success of that, and that it was actually not only a huge success financially, it wasn't a drain on the budget, but that it was also, in terms of a community service, was used by, it was voluntary to the community, it was used by something like over 90% of the citizens opted in on it. It provided them additional services and a reduced rate, which I think that, you know, looking at something like that seemed very appealing. For the reasons I stated earlier, I'd say back burner on that, but it did actually kind of stir up this issue that does keep coming up. It's come up at least every other year that I've been on council about the trash services. We do have a municipality right next door who has took the leap and did the research and the study, and I think just hearing what he has to say and then us making a decision, yeah, we want to look deeper, yeah, we want to put out RFPs, or no, it's over. It just, we make that decision once for all, and just, you know, we don't need to keep this dangling.
I'm going to say if we can, or when we can find a spot on the agenda that works for Devin, to have him come in while the information is fresh. That way we were at least hearing it while it's fresh. Then we can make a decision if we can also include whatever information we have through Open Littleton to bring that in, if we have any of that at that same point in time, and then we can check our sentiment on do we go anywhere at that point in time.
When did Sheridan start the service, do you know?
I do not.
I don't think it's been 6 months.
Yeah.
Hearing from them would be more valuable a year or two or three down the road, because either up front, it's going to be an immediate disaster, or it's going to, they have some hurdles and it's working out really well. It's really down the road where we're going to find out.
And the one footnote I was going to say is I would put it after the budget process, so no sooner than that, so they'll have another probably three months, so they'll be into it for at least this year or somewhere close to that, so gives you rough scheduling, and appreciate Devin, and if we have Dallas or one of their other council members, that would be great too. Okay, and Deb, on the library annex?
Yeah, I just wanted to give council an update. We did bring it up. It will be showing up. We're doing a little bit of research on it to figure out some of the viability. Aspen Grove is doing some of their due diligence and research and getting back some information just to see if this is really something that could work with them. Is it something that could work with us? And then that information is will be compiled. It will be a budget consideration. Obviously, you know, we won't be paying rent, but we have to do a setup, and there'll be staff and stuff like that. So that will be on the budget, and there'll be some backup and supporting information from both Tim and the functionality of the library as that would relate to an annex of it, and then from DDR as to how it would look with them and how it would play out. So that would give everybody a lot more basis for information as to whether or not this is something we felt we wanted to move forward with. So just working on that, and we'll see it, I guess, in a month or so. That's all I have.
Thank you. Reminder to council that next Tuesday's meeting is a late start at 8 p.m. due to National Night Out. I've asked Michael, to the extent that we could get the information as we did last year as to the location for the National Night Out events, if we can have that distributed to the council members so that we can show up if we deem it something that we want to do. Go ahead.
When you're through with that, I'm sorry.
That was the most important part.
I wanted to give kudos to our two Wendy's. I went to a fundraiser event for the omnibus, our transportation, it has a new name, I forget what it is right now. The two Wendy's are very committed to that program. The room was just, it was amazing how they felt. Those two are definitely into it. The front desk Wendy, you know, it even went as far as she may have saved a life due to just being familiar with the users of the program. That's a program that I want to see, you know, always, as long as we can afford that. I know that we have some financial issues in 2018, and that's where I want to continue to see some focus going on in those kind of things for our seniors.
And that fundraiser was at the council direction to try to find other revenue streams other than just the general
So
fund.
anyway,
So I'll pass that along.
Kudos
Thanks.
to both Wendy's.
Great.
As well as all our drivers and everybody involved in the program.
And
Great,
it was a
thanks.
sold-out event. Even some people couldn't get tickets. Thank you all for a meeting tonight. And hopefully we get a dry trip to our vehicles.
Tough coming in.
Was it raining when you came in?
Oh, yeah.